Motherhood. 1 minute, you're mom of the year.
I love you, Mommy.
Then the next, not so much. From bath time to bullying, from potty training to puberty, parenting is full of challenges. But one thing is for certain, you are not alone. Welcome to Modern Mom Probs. I'm your host, author, mother, parenting expert, Tara Clark. Join me while we tackle today's modern mom problems. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to see you again. I feel like it's been a very long time. I feel like it's been years.
I think that the last time we had an interaction was on Instagram Live when my first book came out in March of 2021.
Wow. Then yes, that absolutely makes sense. Your book had such a profound impact on me. And in your book, I'll quote it exactly as I had a miscarriage. That's the title. I had a miscarriage. And it was the first time reading it was one of the first times that I felt that I ever had permission, or I gave myself permission to be able to speak about my own experience with miscarriage. So I'm so eternally grateful to you for that. And even when I wrote my book, which came out in April of 2021, I quote you in it. And I actually say I contribute to you, like the fact that you wrote your book and so freely spoke about your experience helped me be able to say that phrase, I had a miscarriage. Because 15 years ago, when my husband and I were going through this experience, I didn't tell anyone. I might have told like one of my best friends. I did not have the support system. I made it a point to not tell our family. Well, I didn't tell my family. My husband told his mother, and then she like texted me like, "Oh, so sorry," but like that was it. It was like super awkward, really, like almost like like awkwardly inappropriate.
That's the thing, and sometimes it makes it feel so much worse. Actually,
oh, it was like infinitely worse to like just receive a sort of coldish text message like that. But that's another story altogether. But you're coming forward and sharing your story so articulately and so beautifully gave me the strength and the power to be able to talk about mine. And it took me years. It wasn't like, oh, I talked about it like a year or two later. This was 15 years ago. And it probably took me close to 10 years to be able to say those words out loud and talk about it here on the podcast and on my platform and on other people's podcasts as well. Because now I feel like I've shared the story many times, but it took a lot to get to that point. And you were a major part of that. So thank you, Jess.
I mean, honestly, that brings me to tears. That means everything to me. And it's sort of precisely why I started the I Had a Miscarriage campaign when I did, because my hope, my vision was to sort of invite people around the world to think about why they hadn't shared, if they felt a sense of silence because of something in society or something interpersonally, and to really consider, what happens when we stay silent? Does that morph into shame? Does that sort of end up eating us alive, even though we think we are doing it to save ourselves from platitudes or other, uninvited responses or advice? And so it means the world to me to hear that from you. And thank you.
No, of course. And I'm sure I'm not alone in people sharing this with you, saying like, thank you so much for giving me the strength to be able to do it. Because you did start a revolution with the hashtag I had a miscarriage. No, with the community that you started and all of that. You really did.
So I will cry because
I know I'm not alone in coming forward and thanking you publicly for this, because there are thousands of women all across the country, all across the world in the course of the last 5 years or so that have been able to do that. And that's what we're talking about today. Obviously, not just, my own experience with it, but you have a new book out called Normalize It, the upending of silence, stigma, and shame that shape women's lives. So there are a lot of things, Jessica, that happen to us as women, or that we experience as women, that get us stuck into this shame cycle.
Yes.
And I want to just talk about all of it. I mean, to talk about all of it, it would be an 8-hour podcast.
I know. I wish it could be.
But, we don't have an 8-hour one, but we'll see what we could do in an hour.
I know. I mean, it's interesting though. So do you think, from what you just shared a moment ago, did you not speak openly about your miscarriage because of feelings of shame? Or what do you think it sort of came from a different place? Is it because culturally we don't talk about these hard things out loud that you felt like you should keep it hush hush? Do you have a sense of that?
No, I do have a sense of that. And it's a brilliant question. For me, it was easier, and still is easier, for me to tell strangers than it is for me to confide in family. And so that's our own inter-family dynamics. I was able to tell my boss when I needed time off, when I needed to get DNCs, and say, I had a miscarriage, I need to do this. And he was like, I totally understand, take the day off, whatever you need. And that was okay. And I was able to tell sometimes like random coworkers, because there was like a degree of separation there.
Right.
I was not able to speak about it with my family. So again, that was like my own situation, and not necessarily shame per se. I mean, of course, like you're a little embarrassed because you're like, well, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my body? Why didn't this work? And why didn't it work several times? You know, I had 3 miscarriages before I had my son. So it was a very long process and a very long journey to become parents. And that's a whole nother podcast episode altogether, which I have recorded before. But so go listen to that one. But actually I don't even think I did it on my podcast. I think that was on the Infertile AF pod. That's what it was. I was on Infertile. Oh, Allie is the best. I was on Infertile AF with Allie, and I told the entire story. And the story itself literally takes an hour. It's like such a long story. So go listen to that podcast. I'll go rep that one. But to answer your question, no, I don't think it necessarily was the shame. It was my own, like I said, family dynamics more so than anything. But having said that, I do have other friends now that I know, you know, because we can speak about it openly, who felt shame within that. Yeah. And there's shame about a lot of things.
Right. And that's exactly what my second book, Normalize It, is all about. It's sort of trying to better understand this trifecta that I've talked about for years, the silence that begets the stigma, that begets the shame. And so in this book, I'm taking a look at so much more than pregnancy loss. I actually decided to take a look at everything from menstruation all the way through menopause, and how, psychologically speaking, we are almost like groomed from the get-go, you know, from girlhood, to keep these things to ourselves, or to somehow blame ourselves for outcomes that we don't feel good about, or to think, for example, that menstruation is somehow bad or gross or dirty. And the book dives into so many different topics: pregnancy, pregnancy loss, fertility struggles, divorce, sex, friendship, aging, grief, and becoming, opting to not become a mother at all. All the things that somehow women seem to report that they feel like they need to just whisper about, or that they silently hold a lot of complex feelings about. And the book really sort of dares women in a very compassionate way to rethink this. Can we unlock some of these pockets of fear or anxiety that aren't necessarily ours to begin with? I mean, they've become ours. We've adopted them over time. But when you really think it through, it's like, should we feel some of the feelings that we do about some of these very natural and normal events that occur over the course of time?
Yeah, no, I'm so glad. And I say this many times on different episodes and with different people in the industry. I'm so grateful that social media and Instagram has evolved to a place where we can speak about these things. Because obviously, like when I started on Instagram, we were just taking pictures of like lattes and salads and like silly stuff, right? And then it evolved to be able to have these deeper, robust conversations about our personal experiences. And I'm so grateful for that's happened, because when my son was born, or not son was born, but when I was struggling with infertility and miscarriage 15 years ago, Facebook was not in a place where people were talking about this publicly. And we could not go to the support of strangers for this. And maybe it was, and maybe I was just missing that. Maybe I just like wasn't in the right groups or something. I don't know. And now it seems almost natural that people are like, oh yeah, we're talking about this online, and we're talking about this online, and we're talking about this on podcasts. But when I was struggling with this 15 years ago, there was a lot of shame. There was a lot of silence. There was a lot of stigma about a lot of different things, whether it was infertility and miscarriage or even maternal mental health. That was another big one that we now speak so freely about, that even, let's say 13 years ago when my son was born, people were not speaking about it.
In so many ways, this has opened doors for people, women in particular, to talk about the very things that we've been taught not to talk so openly about. And you were talking about maternal mental health related struggles like perinatal and postpartum mood and anxiety disorders. And the fact that people are saying, you know, I'm 1 in 4 when it comes to miscarriage, or I'm 1 in 6 when it comes to postpartum depression, or I've struggled, I struggled through pregnancy, my subsequent pregnancy. Let's say somebody's, willing to be open about what it was like to be pregnant after a pregnancy loss and struggling with anxiety, and then maybe, being deluged by additional anxiety after the baby actually arrives, and through the breastfeeding process or the bottle feeding process. And so I think the fact that people are coming out of the woodworks and sharing really allows us to not just know that we're not alone, but see that we're not alone, feel that we're not alone. I think we're living in an interesting time where there's bumper stickers that say you're not alone, and mental health matters, and lots of talk about mental health in sort of a kitschy way, which I do think is really important because it brings it into the zeitgeist in a more mainstream way. But I still do think that the most important element, or the most sort of transformative part of this, is actually feeling not alone. And I do think that social media has the power to help us feel that way, because at least when I started my campaign, I realized not only, I already knew sort of the facts and figures, but to get into my DMs with people around the world about the feelings, not just the details of what unfolded and subsequent pregnancies or not, but really the feelings of, the darkness and what comes along with platitudes, and the fears and the anxiety that one will never become a mother or won't become a mother again. And so I think that, when social media is used in a way where we are vulnerable and real, we have the opportunity to experience this kind of opening, this collective vulnerability of we are not alone, we understand each other, and we are in this together, despite how disparate and unique all of our experiences are.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of it, and the power of it too. My next follow-up question is, what topics do you feel that people are still stuck in the strident trifecta with? What things are we not talking about enough yet?
That's a good one. We probably, it's interesting because I think you and me both think we are talking about these things a lot because we ourselves and our communities are talking about these things a lot, and we are opening up a space to delve in. However, if you haven't found us or others like us online, I do think, and I know this firsthand through my patients' anecdotes, that they do still feel pretty alone. And so when I get asked the question, do you think culture has changed? Have we made strides? Has social media cracked things open? It's a very nuanced response that I feel I need to articulate as a result, because yes and no, right? It's like, yes, things are a lot more free flowing when it comes to talking about miscarriage specifically. And yet, the research has found that a majority of women continue to feel a sense of self-blame and shame and guilt in the aftermath of loss, and add to that body failure. And so, despite our strides, people continue to feel this way. So, we have to kind of figure out that chasm. Why is it that people still feel this way? What work do we need to continue to do to get to people maybe before pregnancy, maybe in early pregnancy, maybe the moment they lose a pregnancy? I'm not sure, or maybe in childhood. I do think, and this is a whole other podcast, but if, for example, in sex education, we were to introduce the idea that not every, person gets pregnant upon trying to get pregnant or upon having intercourse, and that not every pregnancy works out, this may lay the groundwork for young people, and as they evolve into adults, to really understand and not be so shocked and not think it's their fault.
Mm-hmm. I agree 100%.
I mean, and I totally get why sex ed is pretty much singularly focused on how not to get pregnant and how not to get STIs or STDs. Okay, I get it. But we are doing a disservice to our young people because they evolve into older people, and then they are lambasted by thinking, because they've been taught their whole lives, use a condom, use protection, whatever, because as soon as you have sex, you'll get pregnant. And then for those who start trying to conceive and can't, it's a real mind bender.
Mm-hmm. Good word.
I was going to swear, and I do that a lot, but I decided.
No, I knew that.
I wasn't
like,
sure.
Where is she going to go with this one? Yeah. I was right there with you on that one. No, but I agree. You're like, as a teenager, you're in sex ed and you think that every single time you ever have sex, you will 100% get pregnant. And that's obviously not the case. And so, yes, you're right. There is a certain agenda behind explaining this to kids so that they can practice safe sex. And I understand that, but you're correct in saying that they are also doing a disservice, because then when you are trying to conceive, and that's really what you're working towards.
Yes.
Well, what's going on here? It's just not working like the way they taught me in school.
That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, can we open that up a little bit? Can we talk to kids, young people, about menstruation being normative and what, the benefits are of it? And that leads us all the way to menopause, and I know that's a different topic altogether, but same thing. So many women feel unprepared to even begin to navigate issues that can arise in perimenopause. Mm-hmm. And I hear all the time, why didn't my mom tell me? Why didn't my aunt tell me? My grandmother never mentioned this. Like, why aren't people talking about it? And of course, right now we're in a boom and there are endless books being written about it, which is fabulous. But all of these people who have been swimming in this time period, let's just say from 40s onward, or, whereabout, around there, didn't know what was happening. And,
No.
And then in particular cities like mine, Los Angeles, there is this sort of invisibility that can come along with aging. And so those things happening simultaneously can be very detrimental when there isn't education alongside it to say, hey, this is a normative process. This is what you should expect. Here are your options. And then really get into the psychology around it. What does it feel like to age? What are the benefits there? And of course, how are you struggling? Is there grief when it comes to perimenopause and menopause? So those are just some examples of things that we could be talking more about. And, I don't want to kind of underestimate how difficult it can be to be open and honest. So in my book, Normalize It, I do try to capture the essence of, I'm not trying to say that everybody should get on a rooftop with a megaphone or get on a TED Talk stage and disclose the contents of their personal lives. Of course not. For some people, talking about things that they've endured over the course of their lives, sexual trauma, for example, I include in the book. These are things that are incredibly sensitive. And if people want to somehow sort of move these stories through them and not just keep them tucked inside, there are other ways. Of course, sitting one-on-one in a therapy office, if that is something that's appealing. But even just writing in a journal can be a wonderful way of moving something from our minds and our bodies onto the page. And in so doing, I think there's a way in which we validate and acknowledge the pain and the hardship. You can burn that journal entry, by the way. Doesn't have to be published. It doesn't have to go anywhere. So the point isn't necessarily to be an agent of change. I mean, we just wanted to do that because we did, but not everybody needs to do that. And I still think that storytelling can happen in much more sort of subtle and nuanced ways.
I love that you're sharing that, because I know that so many other people who are struggling with certain things don't publicly want to speak about it. And like I said, for me, it took me 10 years to be able to speak publicly about it. And I know many more people that would rather sit by themselves in a quiet room and just have some time to write the journal entry, rip it up, throw it in the garbage. But at least it's out of them, right? At least they were able to, as you said, let the story pass through them. I love that phrase. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to put it in my pocket. Let the story move through them. When I had started my account, and then once I was able to speak about some of my personal experiences, my girlfriend Goldie, my one friend, she actually lives out in Orange County, California, and she had said to me,
"Wait, did you just say Goldie?"
Yes.
That was my grandmother's name.
Really?
Yes, and we considered naming my daughter Goldie, but we didn't. But I absolutely adore that name.
I love that name too, and I love my Goldie. Like I said, she's out in Orange County, California, and she's a wonderful, wonderful person. We used to work together at Nickelodeon, and then she moved back to California. But once I started my account, she had said to me, "Tara, I know what you went through was so difficult for you at the time, but I'd like to think that there was a reason why you went through that, and why then there was a reason for you to be able to share your story and help others." And it really touched me when she said that, because at the moment, when you're in the moment, you're like, this is just the worst. She was the only friend that knew what we were going through at the time. She was my one friend and confidant through all of this. And it just, like, thinking back now, I'm like, yeah, it seems so simple. And like, of course, yes, that makes sense. But at the time, it was so difficult to go through that. And then, like I said, to be able to speak about it and wait so long to be able to speak about it. But you're right. I think it's interesting when you said that certain people, I liked the phrase, did you say agents of change, can be agents of change to spread to share their story and feel comfortable about that so publicly. Like I know, for instance, my mother would never be like that in any of the experiences that she's had in her life because she's just not a public person. And obviously I respect that, right? So it's just interesting that everyone needs their own method to share their story, get the catharsis of getting it out there so that it's not weighing on their shoulders any longer.
Yeah. And I will share actually. So as you know, after my 16-week miscarriage, I started this whole campaign and started writing, and it led to the first book. And then the first book came out in March of 2021. And 2 weeks later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I did go on to write a few articles about breast cancer, but I consciously decided that breast cancer was not going to be my next, TED Talk. I wasn't going to create an Instagram account and kind of dive deep into that. And why was that? I realized that not only, luckily, gratefully, there's so many people and so many organizations dedicated to breast cancer awareness, but I was exhausted and I was confounded by being in a situation of, me, myself being diagnosed. And I was in survival mode, of course, in those early months and even years. And my point really is that we can pick and choose. We don't have to write a memoir about every single thing that has been difficult in our lives. We don't have to feel compelled to get on social media and share everything. We can find mental health, community, and connection in a variety of ways. And so publicly sharing is not the only conduit for that.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. There's so many questions. I could literally ask you a million questions.
I want you to.
Good. As women, we have so many pressures that are sort of put upon us, starting from girlhood, right? Pressures to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect, just about everything. I want to talk a little bit about where does that stem from? And then fast forward to us as women who are in our midlife, and how can we navigate that? Or then, we navigate us as women in our midlives. And then also, how do we help our daughters?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's important. It is funny because am I midlife? If this is midlife, I'm living a really long life. So it's almost like, what's the word for just having passed midlife? I don't know if there is a word for that. Anyway.
I don't know. All 4 of my grandparents lived to 93, so I'm hopeful.
Oh, you're good to go. That's amazing. That's really awesome. Good genetics there. Wow, where to start with that? So I do think that, based on Dr. Carol Gilligan's work, and I include her in Normalize It, I had the privilege of actually studying with her firsthand when I was living in Boston a million years ago. Her research really dug into the roots of when and where and how these things take hold in girlhood. And what she shares with us in her writing is that, girls know what they know. That's how she puts it, that they know what they know until they don't. And it's not because they don't know. It's because culture says, shh, either be quiet or sit a certain way, or raise your hand in a certain way, be perfect in these particular experiences or environments. And it goes on from there. And so how do we as midlife women help our daughters not go through what we went through? Or just, to break that sort of continual cycle that is found in all of this research? I think it starts by talking and sort of braving the uncomfortable waters of simply saying, well, starting with, how are you doing? How was your day? Engaging in conversations about, I mean, it depends on the age. You don't maybe say to a 3-year-old, how was your day? But my kids are older, so I'm kind of basing it on that. But and I even find myself, because people seem to think because I'm a psychologist that all conversations, go swimmingly and that I'm not uncomfortable with anything. And somehow I understand, girl development, even though I work with adults. And so, but trying to be present with whatever it is that they bring, and I don't know about you, but I find, because my son is older, he's 16 and a half, and my daughter's 11 and a half. She's the one that came after my loss. And it is very different to raise a daughter, especially these days, but maybe forever. And the questions that come and the emotions that come and the struggles that come, very different so far than I've had with my son. Now, again, that may not be based on their sex. It could be, loads of other things. But I think if we can model for our daughters that talking about tough stuff is okay, is not off limits, is invited into the household, that even if I stumble, because there are times when she's told me about stuff that happened in elementary school with kids, and I would have kind of a strong response, but then I would circle back once I calm down about, because you want to pounce and you want to protect your kids. But then I realize I don't want to model for her, this kind of, strong response. I would like to come to these topics with as much calm as possible. And so circling back, which is called, in this kind of the earlier days of psychology, they call it rupture and repair. So you can have an experience of, let's say an argument with your child or with your partner, whoever. And what they found, though, is that the repair is the most sort of profound or the most influential within the relationship, so that ultimately, or down the road, what we remember more so, hopefully, is the actual repair, and that we are all humans. So we can go back to our kids and say, you know what? I'm sorry about my reaction earlier. Let's try that again. Or, mommy felt, overwhelmed by what we were talking about, and I've thought it through, and here's my new take. Again, this is like, I'm thinking about talking to tweens and teens here, so this doesn't apply to toddlers, but
they'll get there eventually. So you need to be prepared for when they are.
Exactly. So I think I think the most important thing really, though, is for us to know that we don't need to be perfect. I think when we've had imperfect childhoods, or if we had trauma in our childhoods, we yearn to do something so differently for our children. But then sometimes we can sort of overblow it, and then we're hard on ourselves. And then that can seep into the fabric of that relationship. And then they feel a pressure unknowingly to be perfect. So we don't want to get into any of that. We are human, they are human, and we want to invite human conversations.
I love it. Invite human conversations. Jessica, I'm going to ask you a question that I ask all of my guests. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
What do you think is the biggest modern mom problem today?
Well, I can tell you what my first thought was, but it's like, I don't want to get into politics here, and you can delete that. Well, I mean, my biggest struggle is my fear around sending my kids to school every day.
Yeah.
The world is really different than when we went to school, and the news is proving that, week by week, month by month. So I think our understandable fear and anxiety around what can happen at school now is a huge problem. And my worry is that again, sort of trickles down to our kids. We're trying to like get them up and get them ready and have them do their homework and be poised and excited for that test. All the while, parents know what just happened in a neighboring state. And we have no idea, we have no control over, how that may or may not unfold closer to home. And so I think that's a big one. But
it is a major one.
Yeah. But I don't know if is that what you can delete this, but is that what you wanted me to talk about, or should I talk more?
You can talk about anything you want to talk about. I'm never here to tell anybody what to talk about or what not to talk about. I don't want to scare
people, but I mean, I do think that.
No, because it's true. The unimaginable has become common, which is it absolutely bonkers that's where we're at right now.
Our parents didn't have to think about this.
No, we had fire drills and stop, drop, and roll, and that was about it. Not having our kindergarteners do lockdown drills. It is unimaginable.
It really, truly is. So I think that, in a more psychological way, the anxiety of living in such a troubled world right now is probably one of the biggest mom problems I think we're navigating.
It is. It absolutely is. Many times people give the type of answer. I mean, I've heard a lot of different types of answers, but many things often are repeated. Social media comparison is one, obviously screen time. Social media comparison is probably 8 out of 10 of the answers.
Wow.
For both our children and for us as parents, and people are just consuming so much content and so much media. And what is that doing to our brains? And even to dovetail that into your answer, we're, one day we're watching Taylor Swift get engaged, and then the next day there's a absolutely horrific tragedy, and then the next day it's something else, and then the next day it's something else. It's like, how do our brains process all of this content, all of this media?
I know. And how do our bodies regulate this? And then how do we have calm, confident conversations with our kids about their everyday lives without infusing them with all of these traumas that are happening around the globe? It is it's unfathomable.
It really is. It really is. I don't want to end this on such a heavy note because this is 1,000% true. But Jessica, I absolutely adore you. I adore your movement. That even talking about all of this stuff does play into normalize it, right? We're normalizing having these conversations about being scared as American parents. So it's not that it doesn't fit with the overall topic. Like, we are normalizing. I have chills thinking about this because this is serious stuff and it all plays together. So I'm glad that we have the opportunity and the platforms to be able to speak freely about this. So Jessica Zucker, tell everyone, where can we find you and where we could read your book?
Thank you so much. I can be reached on Instagram at I Had a Miscarriage. My website is drjessicazucker.com, and my books can be found everywhere books are.
Excellent. I adore you. Thank you so much for being here today. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Modern Mom Probs. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive in today's problem with me, your host, Tara Clark. Join me next time when I'll be interviewing another great guest and tackling another modern mom problem. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review and a rating. As always, you could head over to Modern Mom Probs on Instagram and give me a follow, or check out my book, Modern Mom Probs, A Survival Guide for 21st Century Mothers, available online wherever books are sold. Well, that's it for today. See you next time, folks.